Hey folks, I'm Will Jarvis. Along with my dad, Dr. David Jarvis, I host the podcast Narratives. Narratives is a project exploring the ways in which the world is better than it has been, the ways it is worse, and the paths toward making a better, more definite future. I hope you enjoy it. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. You can get on our mailing list, find show notes, transcripts, as well as videos at narrativespodcast.com. Thanks. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on. Our first big question is, can you give us just kind of a brief bio and some of the big themes you're interested in?
Yeah. I've been blogging now for more than 5 years. I mean, I just realized that time flies, doesn't it? And while my blog is called Everything Studies, and that kind of signifies that I think I am anyway, interested in almost everything, and especially how different things compare to each other, different topics compare to each other, different fields of study and different types of knowledge. But what I'm focusing on, I think, and what's sort of become the brand of the blog is disagreement, both as a process when people are disagreeing and talking about what they're disagreeing about, and the very phenomenon that people think differently about things, they feel differently about things, they have different beliefs, and how does that work exactly?
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I also write about many different things, like I have some articles about fiction, about art, about aesthetics. Also, I just released an article where I basically gushed for thousands of words over a visual encyclopedia I had when I was a kid. That one was mostly for me, but some people liked it as well.
I did.
Thanks.
That was a great post, and we'll actually come back to that a little bit later in the show. But how did you settle on disagreement? And what was really interesting about that? And what is Erisology?
Well, strictly speaking, it's not anything at all, because it's just a word that I made up because I realized there was no word for really the topic that I wanted to write about. Disagreement as a topic of study. I mean, there's some philosophy in there, there's rhetoric in there, there's sociology in there, there's psychology in there, but we don't have a word for for knowledge and understanding of disagreement the way we have words for understanding of life, which is biology, and understanding of the stars, which is astronomy, and so on and so on. I wanted to use that word because I thought there should be a word for the understanding of disagreement. And not necessarily as a narrow field of study, but more like something that has its own subject in school and its own section in bookstores, that kind of thing. I wanted it to be a popular understanding of this as a domain of knowledge.
That makes sense. And how did you settle on disagreement? Was it kind of like, has it always been something you've been thinking about, or was there like a specific point, or did it just kind of emerge over time?
I think I wrote in my first or second blog post that the things that people disagree about probably overlaps pretty well with things that are interesting to think about. So maybe I just came to disagreement because I'm interested in many different things, and I see the difference between them. It's not something I settled on exactly. It's something I came to because of several different things that came together. I've always been very much into philosophical questions, philosophical issues, and the sort of the sort of things that philosophers discuss, some of them at least. And then, of course, also psychology. I've studied both the history of thought and psychology at university, and I've been fascinated about why people think differently about things. For example, why people like different music and why they like different movies and different books is for some reason really, really fascinating to me. And I think that relates quite strongly also to why people have different opinions about politics, social life, philosophical questions, scientific questions, things like that. I think that's all connected, and that's why I think basically all my interests can come together under the umbrella of disagreement. And of course, also I've been addicted to reading when forums was a bigger thing than they are today. Now everything is on social media, but when forums used to be a big thing, I was kind of addicted to reading discussions, and I got familiar with how people used to misunderstand each other deliberately, by accident, or semi-deliberately. And I just got aware of these patterns.
Interesting. I do wonder, what do you think? People disagree. They have different preferences about, let's say just art, like art in general. Do you think that's like some genetic inbuilt difference people have? Just some people are just predisposed to that, or or do we copy high status people within our groups, and then that becomes what we're interested in and kind of differentiates us, or is it something else, or everything altogether?
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that it's probably a little of each.
Gotcha.
No, but my wife just said to me when we were having a discussion about something, that I believe that everything is innate, or at least she thinks that I believe that everything is innate. I don't exactly think that. I do think that innate things are almost always in some way relevant, even if it's very, very indirect. Because I think like inborn personality differences, they don't like decide what kind of music we like, but they probably do affect how our sort of emotional system works, how we feel, what sort of feelings we're more susceptible to, and some sort of thing about what we like, and that will interact with other things in our environment and in our experience to produce things like taste in music. Like, I remember the first time, I mean, there's obviously something for habit, but it's also not just habit. There are things I hear many times and I don't like them. But the first time I've actually heard it described the first time before hearing it in Gödel Escher Bach, the book by Douglas Hofstadter. He described how let's see if I can get it right here. The jig from Bach's French Suite Number 5. He had described how it worked with a counterpoint and everything. And when the first time I listened to it, I thought I was going to listen to it to see if I could understand what he was saying. And the first time I listened to it, it just sounded perfect to me. I loved it for the first time, and that's not something that I have gotten used to. It's quite different from most music you hear today, but that was just something that went straight into my brain. And I think there's something there that just means that you're just predisposed to some things.
Definitely, that's a really good example where you first time you're supposed to, you're like, wow, like this is it. This is good, and this aligns with my preferences really well.
Yeah, it's just like a lock and key, which I found really interesting. I'm sad that my daughters don't seem to share this taste. Whenever they hear some instrumental music come on, they just say, "No, take this away. It's boring." I try to get them to listen for like 10 seconds, and they just won't.
Yeah.
My taste in literature and fiction and even nonfiction aligns really well with my parents, and I've just given up on thinking that my taste in music is predictive of their taste in music at all. I was going to say, when you brought out that list of things people have different tastes about, that one has always seemed like a bit of an odd one out to me, because I can't get it to, in my personal life, I can't get it to correlate, but it seems so intuitive that it should.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that there's a simple relationship between what you like and what your parents like. I mean, sometimes things run in families, but I think it's usually a lot more complicated than that. You throw all these kinds of ingredients into a big pot, and you boil it, and you add spices and whatever, and you don't know what comes out. And the end product, well, a human being is like a dish. It's a matter of what ingredients you put in, and it's a matter of how you prepare it. And it's not just one of the two, but you can get you can change the ingredients quite a lot depending on how you prepare them.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good way to model it.
Yeah,
John,
I've been thinking I'm going to write an article about that for like 6 years. Any day now, I'm going to do it.
excellent. I love it. John, what are some of the weirder things like people would not expect that you found, studying disagreement?
Yeah, weirder things. I don't know exactly about weirder things. One thing that sort of surprised me that I kind of reasoned myself to by reading other things and looking at observations is I've always been curious about when people, well, it's always irritated me a lot when I see people misrepresenting others. Like these people think that, and I'm always like, no, they don't think that. And if you said that to them, they would not agree that they think what you say they think. So why are you saying something about other people that aren't true, that they wouldn't agree with? And I always wonder, like, do people do that with full intent? I'm going to misrepresent these people. Or is it just some kind of mistake? Do you actually believe that it's true and you're just telling the truth? But I remember after reading The Elephant in the Brain by Robin Hanson and Kevin Simler, you're nodding, so I guess you've read it too.
It's really good.
About how much of what we do is unconscious social maneuvering, more or less. And we do this, and our feelings is very much, our feelings and intuitive reactions to things are very much geared up to produce actions on our part that will help us socially. But we won't necessarily be aware of that because our conscious mind is perhaps more a press secretary than a CEO of the firm that is our mind. And I keep thinking about that because I've been writing before, years before that, an article about the phrase "war on Christmas." I'm making air quotes now, but you won't see that on a podcast, but I am. And how people sort of interpret it as meaning different things depending on whether they wanted it to be true or not. And I kind of realized, together with what Hanson and Simler said in that book, I came to believe that people make these kind of interpretations of ambiguous statements, and most statements are much more ambiguous than we think they are. We think lots of things have straightforward meanings, but usually they don't, especially very abstract and loaded things like that. So people interpret what these ambiguous statements mean, and we do it in the way that sort of is most advantageous to our own point. If we don't like somebody and we don't like what they have to say, then we interpret whatever they say in a way that is wrong and unreasonable. And then we think to ourselves that we disagree with them because they're wrong and unreasonable, when the disagreement or the dislike probably comes before. So I guess what surprised me a little bit, or what I found explains a lot, is that a lot of the time where we misrepresent other people, we're not doing it on purpose, but we're also not doing it by accident. And the only way to model this, and I did this in an article called The Prince and the Figurehead, is that we have there are different actors in our head. We're not a unified mind. And it's like we have this sleazy advisor that kind of feeds us propaganda that's meant to, make us feel like we're just doing the right thing and we're just being honest, but we're also kind of stacking the deck in our social favor. So that allows our conscious self to not have to deal with the dirty work, and then instead we have other kind of unconscious parts of our minds that deal with that. It's interesting because before I've been thinking for a long time about how the mind is structured, and there's feelings, and then there's the rational mind and so forth, and I never thought that the unconscious mind could do anything complicated. I just thought it could do, like, animalistic drives, appetites, that sort of thing. But The Elephant in the Brain convinced me that the unconscious mind could do complicated and sophisticated strategic calculations without us being aware of it. And I think that's a huge factor in people, well, disagreeing with each other, or the process of disagreement specifically.
It makes a lot of sense, and it explains a lot, like what's going on when people, a lot of times when they're disagreeing, they're signaling in group affiliation, and then like you said, that is a really good insight that your unconscious mind is guiding you strategically toward the outcome that would be more beneficial to you.
Yeah, and we automatically think that whatever interpretation of something pops into our head, that's the true one, that's the right one, and we don't even see the other ones. That process happens before conscious awareness. I think there was a comment either on the blog or on Twitter or something when somebody linked this or connected this to a study of professional chess players, which is kind of interesting. The professional chess players, they're chess experts, and I read somewhere that there's a process when you get better at chess, when in the first, in the beginning, you have to actually you have to think about what moves are legal.
Right.
But as you get better, you just don't see the illegal moves. You just see, what you can do with the pieces. And eventually, as you become an expert, you don't even see like the bad moves. You feel like the only possible moves are the good moves.
Interesting.
And this person who said this to me said that there's probably something similar here. As you you become an adult and you become good at arguing, you only see the interpretations that are beneficial to your own side, your own point of view.
And you just start pulling them off the table, and then like you only see that's
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
How does one, consciously break out of that? Is it even possible at some level?
I think so. I've gotten kind of obsessive about that. I look at something and somebody might say, look at what this person is saying. Like, well, you could see that way, or you could see it that way. It really depends on what you mean by that, and so on. I do that. Well, I think it would be good if other people did that more. I don't know if I can recommend it personally, because it's a lot of fun to just feel like part of the group, but instead I feel I have to twist and turn and examine everything anybody says and see if like what possible criticisms there are and how it could be true or not true or so forth. So it's harder to get swept up in like community spirit.
Right. you don't get the wear the team flag or whatever.
Yeah,
on the jersey.
Like, oh well, is this really true? I don't know. That kind of thing.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think you should try to exercise that muscle, in the sense that you should try to reinterpret something and see how could you see it in another way. I've got this other post that I've been working on for like years, where I sketch out like a curriculum for how to practice making understanding of disagreement like second nature. And one thing I would make part of that is to take some story, like a news story or whatever, where somebody looks, when somebody looks to be the clear villain, and you try to concoct in your head some sort of scenario or story where that person looks sympathetic. Try to make an effort to turn this around. How can you make this person sympathetic? Because everybody is sympathetic in their own head.
Right.
Everybody thinks they're the good guy, and if you can't understand what it feels like for somebody you think is wrong to be right, then you don't really understand them.
Is a lot of what's going on when people misrepresent or just like assume a lot of things we've been talking about, is it just like a lack of theory of mind? So it's like I'm not understanding that John, like you have your own mind, and you're thinking these things, and you're also trying to optimize and be the best person you can be given the constraints.
Yeah, I think there's a lack of theory of mind, in as much as it's a lack of explicit theory of mind. I think for a lot of the time we just assume that other people are just like us, and that they react the way we would react, and when they don't, we think there's something wrong with them. I mean, that they're being dishonest, or that they're lying, or that they're just wrong or something, and we cannot really understand often that other people are simply different in what background beliefs they have, what things they want to focus on, what they think is the most important, or what they assume, or what kind of frameworks they use to interpret what other people say. Because there's just a lot of symbolic implications in a lot of things that people say, and we don't understand quite what other people mean. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but there's this understanding, like when you go to a different country, you understand that there might be culture shocks. I mean, if you're a competent traveler, you understand that people might behave in ways you don't quite understand because standards are different, or people might interpret your actions in ways that you don't intend because there are cultural differences. I think we should take some of that mindset and apply it more in our everyday interactions. I think that will be useful, because I think I've said this in some blog post or other, that individual people are in ways like different cultures, because compared to, say, 100 years ago or even more, we're not growing up in tight-knit groups, and we're not exposed to the same things, or even like not just 100 years ago, maybe 50 years ago or even 20 years ago, we're not exposed to the same things. We're exposed to very, very different things, and that builds up to, you can say that we live in different worlds, not literally, but it depends on what you mean by worlds, of course, but I'm not going to go into that. But just that kind of care and special understanding that you keep in mind if you're a competent traveler and you go to another country, that I'm not sure how other people are going to see what I do, and I'm going to be a little extra careful when interpreting what other people do as well. That's a mindset we should adopt a little more.
Definitely. And it definitely seems like people underrate how different other people's experiences and preferences are to their own, for whatever reason. Just gotta take a middle shortcut.
I think a lot of people understand that if you ask explicitly, but there's a big difference between understanding something if you ask and keeping it active in your mind, to have that idea that makes it, having that idea making itself heard when it's relevant, as opposed to just being there when it's called upon. You see the difference? What I mean here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Like truly embodying it and understanding it is different from just like, oh yeah, like if I rationally thought through it, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's like people always, if you ask people, should we divide people into us and them, they will say no, and then they'll do it.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah, that would be a bad idea, but yeah, end up doing it anyway. Yeah. Well, but Quinn, did you have a question?
No, I was just, it occurred to me you could phrase it as there's a difference between knowledge which actively filters our incoming perceptions when we synthesize them into thoughts, and knowledge that you put in a drawer and you can take it out if you really need it, but usually it's not playing an active role. But I think that's just what you were already saying, so it's just me rephrasing things in my head.
Yeah, that's also one of those posts I plan on writing sometime. There's a difference between ideas that are like active and ideas that aren't, and I think we seem pretty bad in general at making ideas active in that way, in that they know when to assert themselves. I keep being appalled of how the way we teach kids like math for 10 years, and they know how to do certain procedures, but then adults often seem to lack even the most basic mathematical understanding, because it somehow hasn't made itself into an active part of the mind to think of things in those terms. I always do that, and I can't really imagine what it's like to not easily think of things in mathematical terms, but that's because I've been studying a lot of math, and I think that's very useful. But if we can, put kids through 10 years of it in school and it still doesn't stick in that way, how are we going to be able to, inculcate ideas like, well, don't divide people into us and them, be fair to other people, don't assume that you know too much, and people are different, ideas like that. How are we going to get those to become like active instead of just being there on file to take out when you want to look good?
It would flatter my ideological preconceptions, but I think it's also facially plausible that the schooling may in fact be harmful, that it teaches them, that necessitates even people who can't get it conceptually to carry out the steps, and so they internalize that as a walled off, compartmentalized thing that you do when some authority figure forces you to do it. I'm very convinced that, at least in theory, schooling can be actively destructive towards an individual's attempt to understand the things that are nominally being taught.
Yeah, probably. I've been somewhat skeptical about what good school does as well. But we come back to the thing here about people being different. I think some people really need the structure of school.
Yeah.
While other people might learn better on their own, and it's really hard to know.
Right.
So this one size fits all model is probably a disaster. But if we move away from it much more than we have, then we're also opening this giant can of worms in so many ways.
Yeah.
A lot of trade-offs.
Don't ask me to reform schooling.
John, what is decoupling and why is it important?
Oh dear.
And we might not have enough time.
Oh dear. How far are we gone? Well, like, okay. Yeah. Decoupling is just an idea I had. It was just an afterthought, really. I wrote this really long article about a fight, a disagreement, an argument, a spat between Sam Harris and Ezra Klein about basically the heritability of intelligence and about race and about all the most controversial things you can imagine. And when I finished that piece, just a few days before, I had read a blog post on a blog called Rose Bucket that talked about cognitive decoupling that comes from I think it's coined by a psychologist called Keith Stanovich, who says that some people are better at like abstracting a problem from reality and treating it like a formal exercise, like it's math rather than something that exists in reality, and something where you have to take everything that is real into account, as opposed to if you decouple, you will just remove all the real contexts and practical difficulties and ambiguities and just treat it as a kind of formal exercise, like a typical math problem. That's something that he studied. And then this blog post that I read, I think she was using the author. She was using quotes from Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar about how she had found in school the sterile abstractions of physics. She kind of hated them and loved the sensory fullness of biology instead. And I had that in mind when I finished the article about Harris and Klein. So I added a section at the end where I said maybe this is something to do with the coupling. Maybe the argument that they were having was partly about whether you could study controversial scientific issues in isolation, and if you could judge them on purely scientific merits, or if you had to contextualize them historically and politically in order to be able to evaluate them. That was basically a big part of their argument. And I thought maybe this is something to do with the coupling. Maybe people who like this sort of formal abstraction and are more prone to doing that, maybe they're more prone to thinking that scientific issues should be studied without any sort of without making any reference to politics, or it being basically irrelevant to any scientific question. So yeah, that was an afterthought. I thought maybe it has something to do with this, but it became really popular. This idea, it kind of escaped from this little sphere together with this article, who also became really popular, and people were using it sometimes as a weapon against each other, which I don't like and don't approve of. And
there were
parts of this article that explained this had been like quoted a number of times, and I was kind of a little uncomfortable because I didn't think through the exact wordings. So I didn't think them through so much because my blog wasn't very big back then, so I didn't really care that much. And it feels like I'm overstating my case a little bit. And now people have just taken it and run with it. And now basically it means, like in Twitter discourse and that kind of stuff, it basically means people who think politics should be relevant to controversial scientific questions, or whether it shouldn't. And that's quite different from what Stanovich meant. And it's quite different from many other interpretations. So I don't know what decoupling means. That's the short answer. It's a whole family of things, really. That was long. Sorry. I just
No, that's good.
I needed to tell this whole story.
There were I think, I don't know if it matters, there were multiple points of entry, at least into the subculture. Like when you wrote yours and I read and I really liked it. I already had the term and I got it from Sarah Constantin. And I think there's substantial overlap in your readership. So I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. I think I read Constantin, and Constantin quoted Lucy Keir, who wrote Rose Bucket, and she quoted Keith Stanovich.
Yeah.
So I think that's the line. Yeah.
It's quite interesting. The concept itself. Yeah, it's a really powerful tool just for thinking about disagreements, especially in the political realm, the scientific realm. When controversies come up, are we arguing about whether it's okay just to abstract things away from the political or not?
Yeah, it's interesting because I said decoupling has a whole family of meanings, and this is the one. Politics and science is it relevant or not? That one is the most explosive in terms of controversy and stuff. But I actually think the difference between, I don't know how I should say this exactly, but the difference between the abstract and the formal on the one hand, the perfectly formal, the exact, like program code, in comparison to the vague and the sensory on the other hand. I think that's a really, really, really important division in how to think about things. And it's very important for what sort of disciplines people like to work in, and it affects people quite a lot, I think. But this political interpretation is probably one of the more peripheral ones, but it's the one that's taken over the whole word, basically.
It's quite vivid.
I sent I think I actually sent your article to a professor I had in college, and was able to, by introducing the term, I think she understood it in the more general sense, and you wrote it in the more general sense. I mean, I think you quote Stanovich. I'm not sure, but I think you do.
Yeah.
And that was actually a really useful concept for that relationship, being able to talk about that with her. It was so I think that was just at least one instance where it wasn't anything close to a weapon, and it facilitated a lot of positive sum communication that probably wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Because she was a philosophy professor, so when I was going through my reactions to the text we were reading, I was able to say, okay, well, this might be part of it. And it was a way to talk concretely about that and make it explicit, and then consider, okay, well, is it that? And anyway, I had on my list of things to thank you for.
Oh,
Like a good
appreciate it.
place to.
Yeah. I was just thinking. I'm almost aware that when I think something is important or something is really insightful, it reflects quite a lot on on me. When I think something is, oh, it's really important that people are this way or that way, it's usually because I am one of those ways.
Yes.
There are probably a lot of ways that people differ that I don't quite understand because I'm sort of in the middle.
Yes.
But when it comes to this, I have understood this tendency in myself to really enjoy the kind of tasks where you can just really sharply divide what is part of the task and what is not.
Got it.
Yeah.
Like, this is a closed system. I have perfect information about the system, and I can analyze every little piece of it. That is somehow really, really rewarding to me. And the opposite, where I really don't know at all what is relevant and what is not, and I can't get an overview of the whole thing. It's very stressful to me. I notice that when I have to do it in my job, it's stressful. So in that way, I am very much that type. And I think it also reflects on how you like to write, because I'm really, I noticed that when I cannot make something like perfectly stringent, when I reason, I can show that this is exactly right. I feel the need to say, to hedge and say that I don't know, it might be this way or something like that. While other people can be really, really confident about things they shouldn't be confident about. And while I think they shouldn't be, I'm envious of the rhetorical capacity of some people who just be, forceful and stylish when saying things that are not as obviously true as they make it sound, because there's some kind of aesthetic beauty in that. But unless it's perfect, I can't really act that way.
Yeah.
You recognize? Do you recognize this? Do you understand what I'm talking about here?
Very strongly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, great. It's not just me.
Yeah, it does seem like some people are able to be more confident with less, while being less sure or something.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe I'm just second guessing myself all the time, unless I can, do something with mathematical precision and I can feel confident that this is correct, or at least this is correct given these assumptions in the beginning. That's the sort of things you can feel certain about. And that's also why I try to write things that are under the heading of, this is not certain, this is just what I think.
Yeah.
This is probably a reflection of how my mind works. Take this whatever way you like. Read with caution, read with responsibility, or whatever you'd say. So yeah, it's therefore it's a little, I get a little freaked out if people read stuff and take it that I write and take it very seriously. It's always a little scary because I can't always say that this is true. It's always speculation.
Got it. I want to shift a little bit away from disagreement for a minute. You read a little bit about this, read this on your blog. How important is the shift to agriculture for humanity above like the, the obvious, like maybe excess calories allows us to kind of escape some Malthusian trap?
Yeah, that is a shift. That is a shift from the previous topic. Yeah. This isn't my area of expertise or anything like that. Obviously the shift to agriculture, it made everything. It made civilization as a whole, and it made, I assume, bigger societies, and it possibly made certain kinds of disagreement, if we're going back to that, made it possible by making societies big enough that not everybody knew everybody, and not everybody was in sync that way and had the same experiences. But it's almost too big a question. Yes, the shift to agriculture changed everything. It created everything about what we know about human civilization. So I don't know what to say about, I don't know what to say about it except everything. If you could narrow down the question, change. I might have something more interesting.
Definitely. Quinn, any thoughts?
I'm thinking of Robin Hansen's Elephant in the Brain came up earlier. I know that he sees that as one of the sort of differences. You are different. That's upstream of a lot of the specific distinctions. He has this model of foragers versus farmers. People whose mindset is more like the foragers and more like the farmers. And I have some I have that mentally marked as an interesting theory. I never disregard Hansen lightly. But it certainly seems like it would create a lot of disagreement. And, the population expansion would create a lot of disagreement. And people not mentally adjusting for the population expansion. I still read forums, and I've seen somebody in the last 24 hours who, by their own account, and I believe them, couldn't believe that someone else had never seen people saying X. And for my part, I do believe that the other person had never seen people saying X because, internet bubbles totally facilitate that. But I also believe that they couldn't believe it because they had seen lots of people saying X. And that makes total sense. If you're mentally adapted to something like the ancestral environment or hunter-gatherer bands where everyone shares the same social context. But we don't have that. And I don't think people have adapted to the fact that we don't. But that's all very loose and jumbled.
Yeah. No, I understand. I think you could say there are, I mean, of course, the agricultural revolution changed everything, but it changed us in some specific ways that I think you're alluding to, which is farmer versus forager. Foragers, they have a certain lifestyle, but if you're farming, you have to have a different kind of long-term outlook. You have to have self-discipline. You have to be able to do hard, boring work in ways that I think foraging and hunting isn't boring exactly to people. I don't think it is. I think we kind of adapted to doing that without getting bored.
Yeah.
While doing backbreaking agricultural labor is both tough and boring, and it requires certain things of us that aren't quite natural, and so does, of course, modern society. Something I've been thinking a lot about is how modern society forces us to basically share a community with strangers. We interact with strangers and we do it through the market, but traditionally we, in the human, origin environment, we didn't interact with strangers that much. I mean, maybe sometimes, but for the most part, we interacted with people we knew, and everybody had a reputation, if they were trustworthy, what they were good at, what they could offer you, and so forth. And things like who had social credit, who was considered to be valuable to the group and who wasn't considered to be valuable to the group. That's something that everybody just kept track on in their heads. But in modern societies, we can't do that because there's just too many of us. So instead, we use formalized stuff to keep track of this, like currency. And that inevitably means that the social credit that happens with currency, it doesn't match the way we feel that people should have this social credit. I mean, in a small group, social credit and who is considered valuable is judged by what people think. And in modern society, we still want to do that. We still want to see what kind of person is valuable and what kind of person isn't. And then we also have this formalized currency system that assign people a kind of social credit. This person has contributed, so this person can take stuff out of the common pool of production. So because we have these big societies, there are two different systems that kind of come into they kind of clash with each other. And I think a lot of the big political divides we have is how to deal with this this contrast. Because I think I read the philosopher Joseph Heath on the appeal of socialism, and he discussed some paper that somebody has written about how a socialist system would work, and he concluded that it was very, very similar to how market-based systems work, but the core difference was that people were supposed to care about the community as a whole. You would keep track of everybody's contributions, but it was supposed to be, the motivation was supposed to be to care for the community as a whole. Well, in a market system, you're, in the Adam Smith sense, you do it for your self-interest. And I think that in like an ancestral system, like a pre-modern system where people, we don't really have that kind of transactional attitude. Like I give you this and you give me that, and then we go our separate ways. Instead, you build relationships. And I think for some more than others, but everyone to a certain degree, thinks that this market transactions that we have today in a currency-based system, it lacks something because it doesn't have that social connection that we think exchange is supposed to be. It's supposed to be in that kind of context, and it's not. And I think some people find it very, very wrong somehow, and other people find it less wrong. That was a long one. Did you follow me on that?
Yeah,
No, that's great.
That was a really interesting one. I think I'll take some time to digest it, but I didn't have that framework, and that makes sense. I think that fits with a lot of things.
Yeah, I think I noted, I think I wrote in a footnote somewhere once, and I thought, I'm gonna write a post of that sometimes. But then again, I have like 100 outlines for posts. I mean, literally like 100. But yeah, I think for some, the whole idea of transactions is like impersonal transactions, arm's length transactions, is just wrong. It feels wrong.
Just straight up wrong.
I think so. Yeah, and I can feel that as well. But I'm kind of low on the scale. I don't find it offensive or anything. I just realize that it can feel wrong. That you're not in a social relationship with anyone you have exchanges with.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that really matters a lot. And like that, even on the game theory side of things, repeated games, it really matters to engender trust and things like that. Where if it's one off, what's the saying? You can screw anybody once. It's like that really does matter. Before we let you go, John, we've got a couple of overrated or underrated. If you're amenable, so I'll just throw a turn out.
Okay, I'm gonna warn you. I'm probably not just gonna give a simple answer. That's
it's all good. We'll get to what we get to.
Yeah. Okay.
Overrated or underrated? The Eurovision contest.
Yeah, I've been writing about that. Should I expect any of the listeners to even know what that is?
Oh, that's actually a good point. I got exposed to it early in college, so yeah, probably not actually. I didn't think about that.
It's an annual competition between music acts representing various countries in Europe that come together for this big live show and live voting for a winner. Who's the best once a year, and it's not the artist that's competing; it's the song. So there's one song that wins every year, and what's most appealing to me about it is that it's been going on for like 65 years. It started in 1956, and it's basically, it's happened every year except for 2020. It was canceled because of COVID. But it's been going on for that long, and it's so interesting because you can see the whole history and life of television in this contest. I mean, and there's game theory, and there's lots and lots of numbers, and there's politics, and there's there's so much history and numbers and stuff to look into it. So I really love it. And then there's a completely different aspect of it. That's like crazy staging, gimmicks, flamboyant costumes. Anything to grab people's attention, because you need to grab people's attention if you want to win, and so forth. So I've been a fan of this since I was 12 or something, and I didn't get into it so much like 5 or 10 years ago, but now I'm back, and I'm a huge fan. So while I wouldn't say it's underrated, it's a huge deal. At least it is in Europe, and where I come from. So I wouldn't say it's underrated that way, but a lot of people look down on it. So in that sense, I would say it's underrated.
I love it. I love it. Wikipedia, overrated or underrated?
It probably was underrated like 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But now it's probably recognized as being the default source for any kind of information. I think people are probably right when they say it's not reliable when it comes to controversial subjects sometimes. I don't know. I haven't done the due diligence on that to say anything definite. But when it comes to just reference information, it's unbeatable. So I think it's probably properly rated right now, but it used to be underrated.
Like it. Infinite Jest, overrated or underrated?
Oh,
That's
dear.
a tough one.
That one. Yeah.
That's a really tough one.
Yeah. It was, I read that, wrote a review of it, and I did not really care for it in that I didn't like reading it.
Yeah.
But it has stuck with me. It
Interesting.
has stuck with me for a long time. And I'm thinking about it. I'm not so sure I'm thinking so much about the actual story, more than I'm thinking about the book and the experience of reading it. So in that way, it's a very postmodern book in that it's about itself in a way. It's self-referential in that it is almost about the experience of reading it than it is about anything in specific. I mean, it has some interesting themes, but it's also buried in so much that doesn't feel necessary to me. Maybe I'd get it if I read it like 2 or 3 more times, but that sounds like
that's a lot of
insane
time
proposition. There are other books to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Specialization, overrated or underrated?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this one. Oh, do I really have to pick one?
No, you don't.
It's probably I think I'd have to pick underrated. That might be a little a little weird to hear from me, considering I describe myself as a generalist and I'm almost a pathological generalist. But I think I think we should divide tasks perhaps even more than we do now. I'm just thinking of things like people used to have secretaries that did the administration, and now people do that themselves, and they send 100 emails every day and they get interrupted 300 times every day. And that sort of thing. I mean, my job involves probably doing like hundreds of individual small tasks every day, and that seems inefficient. It seems it doesn't help.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking about when you said specialization. And in that case, I think we should have more specialization in that way. Like people like doctors and teachers, they should be basically relieved of all their administrative tasks and just focus on what they're good at.
Yep.
So in that sense, I think people should focus much more on what they're good at, and they should have the possibility to do that. Yeah. But then we should also have some people who specializes in generalism and the specific intersection of specific tasks.
It's good. That's good. I like it. Well, John, thank you for coming on.
No, it was my pleasure.
Do you have any parting thoughts, and where can people find your blog?
Parting thoughts? No, I think I've been sharing enough thoughts for the last hour.
That's good.
And my blog is everythingstudies.com. Or you could probably find me on Twitter if you'd like, which is everytstudies.com, because everything studies is too long, apparently, for a Twitter handle. So it's instead of things, it's just a T. I don't tweet a lot nowadays because I'm on a tweet fast, and I'm feeling a lot better because of it.
That's good.
So if you follow me, maybe just expect maybe a few post updates and that thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, that's our show for today. I'm Will Jarvis.
And I'm Will's dad.
Join us next week for more narratives.